Welcome to the WoW podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and insights from our university community. Tune in for conversations about growth, success, and the power of communication in the academic world. So get ready to soar with us on the wings of wisdom.
Both of my parents were professional entertainers.
I enjoy jazz.
I had a Christian band, kind of an angry evangelical. I was shy as a kid,
I was Judge Hawthorne in high school.
I always feel like the best presidents are almost invisible.
Work hard, help others. Work more, help yourself. And when you need help, ask for it.
Well, personality. But I'd also say to students to work harder than you think you can.
All right. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wings of Wisdom, WoW podcast. Chelsea Allen, WCC coach, is here with us today. How are you doing, Chelsea?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, very well. Dr. Andrew Roble? How about those Chicago Bears?
Oh, no.
Okay, all right. Today we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Campo. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm honored to be here.
How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Maybe we can start from not the very, very beginning, but from your time as a student, as an undergraduate student, if you could tell us something about your own educational journey.
Sure. Well, I start this story with kind of a depressing story in that I was planning to go to Carnegie Mellon University, had gone to their acting school and auditioned, and I drove cross country to get home because my sister was getting married. 2 days before she was getting married, my mother had a tragic accident and died from a cerebral hemorrhage. That's like the next day. People who had come from my sister's wedding stayed for her funeral. So I never went to Carnegie Mellon. I stayed at UNLV. And I mentioned that because my early days in college, I was miserable, didn't want to be in school, felt like I really wanted to be in Pittsburgh and fulfilling my dream. But I stayed with it. And it's one of the messages I try to tell students, that you're going to have unexpected challenges for sure. So my undergraduate career were difficult days, but I was grateful because I had people around me who supported me through a difficult time, and I stayed with it.
Sorry for your loss.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Sorry about that. How did you decide on a major? What were the factors?
Well, part of it was both of my parents were professional entertainers. I was just hearing Chelsea talking about the impact of her mother, who was a journalist. Well, same with me. My mom and dad they met on the Jack Paar television program in the 1950s. So, you grow up thinking that your environment is normal, but it really was different. But that was the influence. So I was influenced by them, and, the theater arts and entertainment just generally was a part of my life. And I loved the people who were in my home and in my parents' lives. And there was just something wonderful about the arts that made it easy to choose theater. And I had a love for English at the same time. It's almost impossible not to. And so that's why I chose theater as an undergraduate major.
Amazing.
And to just follow up on that a little bit, so you have a background in English and theater. How has that kind of shaped your wonderful and generous tenure in higher education?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's a great question. I always, again, point back to my lineage because I remember my mother used to read Robinson Crusoe to me as a young child. And now as an adult, I realize it's really dense language. Yeah. It's a difficult novel, but when you're 5 years old, they're just words. And so I think about the power of language. It really is. It's my mother reading. She was a great reader, obviously a professional entertainer. So her reading Daniel Defoe to me as a 5-year-old truly shaped my life. And it raised in me this love of words, love of language. And what a great book, right? It's the adventure and all of those things. So to me, what's great about a college environment is it's that seeker, right? That person who's yearning, wants to know everything. Their ideas go everywhere. They're interested in looking under the surface. And so that's one of the things that I think about is my early life shaped this just interest in things and in words and in language in particular.
Do you have a favorite author right now?
I always fall back to Shakespeare, and, it probably sounds trite, but as another one of those things where my mother loved Shakespeare and bought me the little tiny Folger editions, before Chelsea was born. I'm reading these wonderful little editions that had explanatory notes, for the words that were in Middle English or early modern English that I wouldn't know. So Shakespeare is certainly my favorite author. But I studied Arthur Miller as a college student. My uncle knew Arthur Miller and actually connected me to him while Miller was still alive. And so I have a great love for his work as well.
I was judged Hawthorne in high school.
Is that right? Well, Hawthorne, again, phenomenal writer and great American writer as well.
The first classic book I picked up was Wuthering Heights, and that
Come
was
on.
a trip.
What a trip. When you talk about language, Chelsea, oh my gosh.
It's wonderful, yeah. So during your time at Ashland University, you've overseen significant milestones. The correctional education program, a major fundraising campaign. Can you tell us about your perspective on these achievements?
I always go back to the team that made those things happen. I always feel like the best presidents are almost invisible, behind the scenes, trying to make the connections. But frankly, correctional ed program was something that Lucille Ford started here. We're sitting in a building that probably wouldn't exist without Lucille Ford. She's still with us at 101 years young. But it was her vision that got it started. And then when Todd Marshall came, he blossomed it. And so I, played a connecting role in that. But even with the fundraising campaign, to me, it's connecting with people and letting them know what a great place this is. And I think we're in the Archer Library. With that campaign would not have happened without more than $20 million worth of gifts from one family who lived across the street pretty much from the Ashland Country Club and knew this institution. And their love for Ashland is just something that we were able to bring to the forefront. So from my perspective, it's just a great team effort, Chelsea. I'm glad to have been a part of it.
I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Hearing your story was very inspirational, so that's great.
Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. And you talked about the power of the community and how everyone comes together to advance our objectives as one institution. And you've led Ashland University through difficult times, and notably during the pandemic. What has been the secret to maintaining that force and that connection that we all have with AU as one community throughout those difficult times?
When we came to Ashland, we saw the strength and power of this community, and I think us not relinquishing our mission was the biggest thing. It would have been easy to pivot and even despair during that period of time, but the community really came together and saw each other through. We recognized in one another both times of difficulty and support. And I think that's really what made Ashland Ashland. It's what was here when we came. We tried to nurture that and foster it. And so that, that whole idea, Mohsin, that you have seen, that when crisis hits a community, what's inside comes out, right? It's kind of a strange image, right? When you're squeezed, right, what's inside comes out. And, when we were squeezed during COVID, what was best about Ashland rose to the forefront. And so we were grateful to see that get us through. And here we come out the other side and we're doing well.
Were there any unique insights that you kind of learned throughout that challenging time?
Oh my, so much. I learned more about communicable diseases than I ever wanted to know. I felt like we needed another degree and, all of those kinds of things. But, it was the sense that we connected across racial lines. We connected across age lines. We connected across geographical lines because we brought in experts from all over the world. We saw an intergenerational community that came together. So I think that's one of my takeaways, is that when crisis hit, we shared more about what connected us. And it wasn't a time of rancor. It really wasn't. It was a time when, hey, we all need each other. And so that was a real positive that we took away.
Wonderful. So we're so excited for your new opportunity and to see you go forward in the future and create new projects and new places. Can you say anything what you think as you go on in your own journey? What do you think that Ashland will look like in the future?
That's a great question. I know that we will stay connected to Ashland, so that much I know. Even as we go to the Museum of the Bible, we think that there are some real connections that we can continue to make, giving students opportunity to come to the museum as curators or docents and many other ways. So that's one thing. And I think the Ashland University of the future, I hope, will have a lot of the same hallmarks, especially when it comes to mission. I mean, that's really what's most important. Buildings and programs will shift, and we know that that's just a part of the future for Ashland. But if the mission stays what it is, and that is that we believe in the power of education, this idea that there's something transformational that happens. You know, Chelsea has already talked about it. She's come here and come to know and love this community. That's what I hope and believe will be the Ashland of the future. And that's, I know when Karen and I think about Ashland fondly, it's hoping that that will never change about us.
Do you have any quick notes for our students about the importance of service?
Yes, I think when we look at what was distinctive about Ashland, that was one of the things from the beginning. Our students are involved in this community, serving one another. It's a core value here as well. You know, students will work, serve, and lead with integrity. You know, those are all core issues that are right in our mission. And that's what we have found, that our students, our faculty and staff, they're service-oriented. And so, yes, those core values really help shape the campus, and I hope they'll continue. I'm sure they will.
Very good. In fact, that Chelsea is here with us today, that's an example of service and engagement, civic engagement. So
I'm really thankful for all of the opportunities that we have to do that here, because some bigger campuses don't have all that kind of opportunity for student involvement. So with you have a lot of, experience in your background, education-wise. We talked about how you went into theater and drama. What key advice do you have to offer to students regarding choosing their life path?
Well, one key is to not be limited in terms of what their expectations are. You know, just in our discussion off camera, we were talking about our individual lives and our journeys. And one thing that we can all say is it didn't turn out exactly the way we anticipated, and yet it was right. It was right for us. So that's one of the things. I always challenge students to get involved in something that probably is a little bit of a stretch for them. You know, I don't know anything about whatever this topic is, line dancing or, some student group, but do it. Get involved in it and see how it might bring out some part of your personality. But I'd also say to students to work harder than you think you can. No student finishes their collegiate career and feels like, I gave it my all. And if you have a regret, don't let that be it. Push yourself harder academically. Push yourself harder into community. Push yourself harder when it comes to service. It feels like you're working really hard, and you are, but take it from people who have gone through the journey. It's the most wonderful time in your life where you have more opportunity to really dig into life that you may not have otherwise. So those are a couple of things that I would think about. Let your interests go to lots of different places and work really hard at it.
Good, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, very good. And I would like to kind of move step forward from this, amazing advice to our students, and look at your own leadership experience. And I would like to know, how has your involvement in organizations such as NCAA and the Museum of the Bible, how have those experiences shaped your perspective on leadership?
Well, I think if I start with the museum, it's a global institution. So it's given me a global view of the world and the world of how the Bible has touched the entire globe. We used to say perhaps that it was the most important book in the Western world, but today it's truly in the East and the West. So just for a specific example, there were artifacts at the museum that had been in Iraq for years. And when we looked at provenance and the history of those artifacts, we found that they were actually stolen from Iraq decades and decades ago. And so restoring them to that country, which was doing the right thing, but also understanding the history of Iraq, its own religious history, its cultural connection to both the Bible and many other faiths, was fascinating. And to me, again, that's what you hope for when you join any board, is that it expands your vision and your worldview. And so the same thing with the NC2A. The NC2A has had its controversy in these years, right, with NIL and now athletes being paid. And what is the role of the NC2A? Are they exploiting students or supporting students or both? Are women's athletics supported at the same level as men's athletics? And if not, why not? These are important questions. And so the NC2A has helped me deal very specifically with our own student athletes and helping to support them more effectively, but also to see nationally what they're doing well and what they're not doing so well. And it challenges me as a leader to be more effective also.
Wonderful. So I don't know if you saw our video with Dr. J. And
I haven't seen it yet.
okay.
No.
Well, you should take a look at it if you get some free time. But I talked a little bit too much about gardening, and we had a passion for that.
It's a huge chef.
Nice.
Do you have any hobbies that you like to do? Any kind of passions in your spare time?
I do, and it's funny you mentioned gardening because Dr. J, no, he's truly a professional at it. He's a biologist and knows all of it quite well. My gardening follows my passion for food, which is really about, pasta and tomato sauce. So I basically garden tomatoes and basil, and as long as those two do well, anything else in my garden is fine. So gardening is one. I actually love birds, so I wake up every morning, and one of the first things I do is I light a fire. So in my home during the wintertime, I light a fire and I feed my birds. And so that's another hobby. I probably chop wood 3 days a week. Something that students and faculty would not know about me is that at least in the wintertime, we live in a home that was pre-Civil War, and so it has a really efficient fireplace. And so we do that as well. I love being in the gym, so I'm in the gym pretty much every day, or doing something like playing tennis or pickleball, racquetball. We love racket sports and any kind of activities. We love to hike and ski, and so we're into anything that's I guess athletically or related. So those are some of the hobbies that I've been involved in.
And for your tomatoes, are you a kind of a snob like my father-in-law, or do you do like heirlooms and a variety?
I do some heirlooms just for salad consumption, but because the tomato sauce, you've got to have the aromas, and so. Yes,
San Marzanos.
There you go. So not just any aroma. So Andrew, the San Marzanos are unlike any, just for their flavor and for the pasta sauce. You don't need tomato paste when you've got great San Marzano.
But now that I know that, I got a bunch of seeds I'm going to give you.
Oh, see, I'm a happy man.
There you go.
Thank you.
Someone has mentioned that you have been involved in a band. Is that true?
Somehow students find these things out. And it's true. I mean, the reality is my sister, Kathy, who's been on campus, she sung here on campus often during homecoming. She is a professional singer and got all the talent. So whenever I talk about the band, I really was the backup to her vocals. She was really a terrific singer. But yes, we did. We had a Christian band, kind of an angry evangelical band. But we had a prison ministry and loved doing open air concerts. The name of the band was 9/11. This is before 9/11. And so, and so it was an emergency number back then, but it took on a whole new dimension. But it was, again, growing up in a family, where you were kind of like, the family from Sound of Music. We were all singing and putting on shows and thought it was normal. But truly, my sister Kathy is a great singer, and it was fun being in the band back in the day.
Was it all in English or some in Spanish?
It was all in English. We sang in Spanish as kids a little bit, but that group, yes, was all in English. Yep.
With your background in music and theater and the arts, how do you see the arts playing a holistic, development of students?
That's such a great question. Part of me feels like I could take an hour and just talk about the power of the arts. I heard somebody saying once that no one who is in a warfare has spent a lot of time listening to jazz. And, I understand what they're trying to say about that, but I think there's something actually deep about that statement, that when you think about the people who are most interested in things like power and greed and money, we're all susceptible to those things. But I have my experience in the arts, and I don't want to over-idealize it, but it feels as though people who have a true passion for the arts have put their priorities in the right places. They see the beauty in life and in mankind. And yes, with all of our blemishes, it just shifts your focus away from the things that very often become these elements that lead to conflict and hatred and separation. I just don't see it. I mean, the arts, yes, of course, there have been great artists. And I know, yes, the first thing that people say to me is, Carlos, the Nazis were, aficionados of Beethoven. Well, one thing to me has nothing to do with the other. To me, the arts is a way to open your mind and life and world up to what is beautiful. And what is beautiful connects us as people. And so, yes, that's what I would say to students, that an appreciation for the arts will open up your heart and your mind and your life to something that is enduring and worthwhile.
Enduring values.
Yes, no
Yeah.
question. No question.
I don't know if you know this, but Mohsin is a jazz aficionado.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know about aficionado, but I enjoy jazz.
How wonderful.
And actually, Chelsea is an art major.
I am an art major.
Oh, cool. That was wonderful.
Going back to opening your mind up, I was going to go to trade school, and here I am.
See? Yes. You found the right trade.
Sure did.
Well, I want to ask about AUC, or accent on writing, initially, and that came out of your office.
Right.
What prompted that initiative?
You know, what prompted it was my years and years of teaching English composition and being in higher education and working at the national level to try to improve this very difficult work, as you know, of how do you improve in 17 weeks or so, even if you have a year or so, to work with students and improve their skills around writing and oral communication. One of the things I knew deep down was we can be better at this, right? Very often what we do is we despair and throw up our hands and think we make incremental differences and it's not worth the effort, because it is really difficult. It's hard work to lay the groundwork and ensure that students get better at it. But what I said was, when you look at academic improvement, it takes years. Let's just say we'll start or improve our biology department, right? To get a top flight biology department, it takes infrastructure and great faculty and a lot of investment. And if I said to you, what are the top 5 biology departments in the country? You'd probably be able to name some of them. Top 5 engineering schools, right? But if I say to you, what schools are the best at turning out better writers and better oral communicators, you might be stymied there. I mean, you're imbued in it now, so you may know that. So I thought, here's a way, especially when I talk to employers. This is the first thing they said to me. You know what? Right, your students, not just Ashland students, but college students in general, they can't even put an email together that seems cohesive, right? And when they sit down to have a discussion like this, they struggle with oral communication. And I thought, we can be better. We can be better. So that's really where it came from. But honestly, without flattering you unnecessarily, Mohsin, you have taken this on and become very serious about this and taken it to a whole new level. And it's not just you. Obviously, others have been involved in this. But it's like anything else. It takes an idea and then people to be dedicated to it, to see it through. But that was the seed for it. The seed for it was 20 years of labor, working in the field and knowing that could be a hallmark for Ashland. And I do believe that it's something we're already seeing some traction on. And in the years to come, when I think about Ashland in the future, I think it can be truly a badge of honor where our graduates, when that reputation gets known in the community, you know, you hire an Ashland grad and they're pretty solid in these areas. That's our hope.
Yeah, very good.
And the great thing that Mohsin has been able to do as a director of the Writing and Communication Center is have this expansion where we don't just work on essays, but we also do presentations. We work on digital media. We now have embedded coaching. And even, so this will make you very happy, we now currently have 3 native Spanish speakers. We have 2 from Spain and 1 from Peru that will also assist our students with languages. So under his leadership, the program has just flourished.
Everything I've heard, so that's wonderful to hear. Excelente.
And by the way, Andrew is coordinating accents on communicating right now, so
Wonderful. Thank you.
We're very lucky to have him with us, and spearheading integration of languages within the WCC. So now we do have coaches who can help with Spanish assignments, and hopefully that will extend to include French as well, or any other languages that we have open at AU. So
Yeah, and support our language programs, because I mean, they're integral in the development of our students, and there's so many skills that the students will learn and pick up just in the learning process, not even being able to speak the language, but in the process of learning the language.
Agreed, without taking us too far down that rabbit trail, because we're all interested in language as well. That's truly one of the misconceptions, right, about language study, because Americans very often will say, well, gosh, I studied Spanish or French or another language, Arabic, for years, but I can't even say 5 words. See, we know that language acquisition and language study in some ways are 2 separate things, right? And the study of language is the study of geography and history and all of those things, as you say, that have all these other benefits beyond language acquisition, which is important too, but takes much more than, a class or two in a language to acquire the language effectively.
And I think it helps us connect with different people because we understand their culture.
Yeah.
And it creates empathy. It creates everything we're trying to put forward here at Ashland about kindness and understanding and building connections.
Yes, it's a very old African proverb that I heard many years ago, that when I look at you from far away, you appear to be a wild animal. And then when I see you come closer, I realize you're a human being. When you're closer still, I see you are my friend. And when I feel your breath upon me, I know you are my brother or my sister or my daughter.
Yeah.
Very good. Well,
That's very powerful.
Yes, it is.
Wow. And that's something that I really love about AOC Accent and Communicating Initiative is the fact that we're bringing together people from different colleges and departments and having that unified vision in helping our students become effective communicators. And this is, by the way, a very, very common thread throughout our podcast episodes. And we bring in professors and administrators. And last time we had archers.
Oh, great.
Jen and Bob, and they both, talked about the importance of communication.
That's wonderful to hear. And as you know well, for language study and improved composition, reading and writing, to be effective, it has to be embedded across the curriculum, right? It can't just be, well, go to this center and that's where you'll get it. I remember, especially as students' reading skills have declined, which they have over the years, that we started doing reading instruction. There are reading specialists, of course, that are trained that way, but many people aren't even aware that that's a separate field. And you talk to a hard scientist or someone who's involved in literature, and they say, gosh, my students are struggling just in reading this dense material. And of course, instructing faculty even about how to help students to be better readers is another skill. And so it's wonderful to see the work that you're doing here at the center to really embed this in the curriculum. That's so important.
We're taking that multimodality very seriously and would like to also subsume reading to the work that we do. So, yeah. And speaking of oral communication, now let me ask you about this. Actually, I see you as one of the strongest public speakers ever. Not just at this institution, but what's your secret?
Thank you for that compliment. That's high praise. Frankly, growing up, in this family of entertainers and then having a theater arts background, I was shy as a kid. People say that's not possible. Especially my family would say, come on, that can't be true. You're not a shy person. But I was very, very shy. And you often see this actually with entertainers, is that deep down they're shy people and generally will move away from a crowd. But, when so many others say it's the most terrifying experience in their life, to me it's energizing. It really is. There's something about public speaking that is energizing. And I have just had great examples in my life, I guess is what I would say. I generally have learned more from watching than from doing. And my mother was one of the great listeners that I've ever known. And so she was listening in very intentional ways. And so I try never to attend a public event without really listening and trying to learn from other speakers. What was it that they did especially well or not well? And to me, the greatest advice that I can ever give a public speaker is this whole idea of being natural, right? If you relax and are natural and real. I remember the first time a student said something to me about keeping it real. I didn't really know what it meant. I'm keeping it real, but I knew it was something about authenticity. And that's one thing that people can see through immediately when when you see a public speaker and they're just being a little bit too showy, or they're being too stilted, or even staying with the script, because I've seen people read from a script and still be very authentic. For me, it takes a lot of preparation. The way I work is I do a lot of preparation, and then I don't use notes, because I feel that for me as a speaker, they hold me back. But public speaking for me is energizing, and I have had great examples around me. I appreciate the compliment, but it's still something I'm learning and growing in.
I was going to ask about the process, but you kind of answered that.
So do you actually
rehearse?
practice your speeches?
Yes and no. I will say this, that there's a through thread of a speech that I give that I've given probably 50 or 60 times on identity that I feel is just one of these works in progress. And while it's never the same speech, depending on the group, I will tailor it somewhat. There is something to me about naming and identity that is just part of my life. Growing up as Carlos Campo with a Cuban father, but an Irish mother, I never looked like my father, so I didn't have, these sort of ethnotype features that my father had, a dark skin. I didn't have his accent. And so I grew up not feeling like a Latino, so Carlos Campo. I really wanted to be more like, Andy, Stevenson or Smith. And what I found when I started talking to people about their names and about their identity and about their past, I found out that immediately there was a connection there. So that's one of the things, that speech is something that I tailor to different crowds and different people, but has been one that I've probably given, I said 50 or 60, probably more like 150 or 60 times. And then others around education and the power of education and learning and study. And even starting with that story about my mother reading to me there's something also that connects with people when you talk about family and talk about yourself. There's nothing more disarming in some ways than being honest about yourself. I mean, I opened with the story about my mother's death, which was, but I understand that it was probably in some ways the turning point, one of the most important moments of my life. And the reason I call it out is that, especially as we age, Chelsea may not have these yet in her life, but she will, right? These moments that become turning points, they're magnified in ways that sometimes can be very difficult, but that's what people want to hear, right? That's what joins us as human beings. It's like, thank you for being vulnerable enough, for bringing me into that conversation. It's disarming and sometimes even a little uncomfortable, but after a while, you learn to appreciate it, I think. Yes.
Wonderful. So you talked a little bit before how the role of the president is to be kind of behind the scenes, doing stuff. So this is your hardball question. What would you say as you not leave Ashland, because you said you're going to maintain connections, and we're very grateful for that. What is something that you think you're very much proud of that you've done here, like a moment or an action?
The things I'm proudest of.
I know there's a lot.
Well,
just one.
Thank you. The things I'm proudest of, honestly, are things that I'm almost uncomfortable talking about publicly because they're connections with students. My little brother, I participated in Big Brothers, Big Sisters in Ashland when there was such a thing. It's actually, it's morphed a little bit now. Well, my little brother was preteen, is actually a student at Ashland today. And so, that's a really proud moment, and so it's those kinds of moments with students over my 9 years here. And honestly, students who, for whatever reason, were in a difficult situation. And I had the ability as president to help them, financially with some advice or a scholarship or in some other way. Because honestly, the hardest thing at Ashland is when I feel like I can't help a student, when they somehow beyond my reach. There's a way, you know how it is. We all have situations where sometimes it's beyond my control. So those are very difficult. So, I think that's what I'm proudest of, are those moments where I was able to make a connection with a student or their family and help them through a very difficult time or situation, help them succeed. But, even something as simple, I'm almost pointing to it because there's a prayer garden right outside the building here that I think about in 100 or 200 years, Ashland is still here. That students will find, and others will find that as a place of reflection, and so it's those those things too. I also hope that programmatically, that some of these changes, like even the WCC, to me, when I think about a great college or university, if you're not committed to something as basic and powerful as communication, so my hope is that those would be elements of the legacy that won't necessarily be tied to me, but will definitely be proud of.
So if you had to say something to students about one of the most integral parts of what you've done in your life, would you stress service to others?
No question. No question. I think it's Rick Warren's book, that opens with the line, "It's not about you," something like that. Someone told me once that the first word a child learns isn't mama or dada. Those are just echoic sounds that they make. But the first word they actually learn is mine. And that our lives are moving from mine to thine, or from mine to yours, right? And so I think there's something deep and true about that once you take the focus off of yourself and try to do what you can to help others, your life becomes meaningful.
My mom told me once, she said, work hard, help others, work more, help yourself, and when you need help, ask for it.
Wow.
And that was, I wrote it in
Very
the
powerful,
writing
yeah.
center too.
Yeah,
I
he
loved
did.
it.
Always listen to Mom.
Yeah.
She's got advice like that, especially. You're very fortunate to have had a mother who
I sure am. Yeah.
gives you that kind of advice.
Do you have, speaking of advice, any general advice for students?
What I always tell students, especially when you first start, is connect with faculty. Faculty at Ashland, I know I'm paid to say things like that, but they're incredible people beyond what they do in the classroom. They're caring. This accent on the individual that's been around here for decades is real and it's true. And it just breaks down walls. It's good for you. It's good for the faculty member. So that's one advice. Go meet your faculty every semester. Wherever they are, they have office hours. You go meet them and talk to them. Let them know who you are as a person. And that's one of the things I always say. I always say to students, here's practical advice. Your first assignment in every class is the most important assignment. First assignment. Not the one that has the most points accorded to it, the one that is first, because you establish yourself as a student with that faculty member immediately. She's an A student. He's an A student. He's a hardworking student, even if it's not an A. Look at the work they put into the first assignment. Now you've established yourself. Once you've done that, then you're predisposed in every regard to be a student who's hardworking and successful. So that's certainly another piece of advice. And you've heard, my other advice to students is stretch yourself. Stretch yourself. Get out of your dorm room. Get out of, whatever that little cocoon is in your life, because it's natural. These are the people I feel comfortable around. They're in my sorority. They're in my fraternity. They're in my ethnic or racial or religious group. That's wonderful and that's good. Push outside of that. Meet someone who's outside of that group, someone who's older, someone who thinks differently, someone who's in the military, someone has had physical challenges, someone, whatever it happens to be. Those are the people you want to expand your worldview. Talk to some, go to the international club. Talk to those people. We talked about the Ukrainian students and, these things that I'm hearing about the Ukraine. I know nothing about the Ukraine. So I go to these students directly. Tell me about your country. What do you know about these things? So those are the pieces of advice I'd have for students. Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about how important it is for you to be a mentor to the students and our faculty, how much it means to us?
Mentorship is so critical. I think you've already heard it, right? It's the people in my life who shaped me. And so I've made it professionally something I'm always involved in. So I have been involved through Esperanza, this this group that helps Hispanic students succeed in the Cleveland area. They have a formal mentorship program that I have been a part of. I talked about, Big Brothers, Big Sisters as well. So I do it personally and professionally. I always try to have a mentor who's older than me, so generally a generation older and a generation younger. I always want to honor my elders and have someone who's older than me helping me understand my situation better as a father, as a husband, as a professional. And then I look for younger people as well, finding ways to help them as well. So to me, mentorship is one of the keys to my life, both personally and professionally. And I hope that that's something I've been able to pass on to others.
Fascinating. Yeah. Thank you. And again, like going back to accents on the individual. So it's not just a foundational principle that we, put on the wall, but it's something that we embody and enact and live every day. And it also holds us accountable as employees of AU, right?
Yes. It's a high standard.
It is. It is. And I think it makes Ashland University as an institution a unique place to be at. So,
agreed. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you.
Campo.
Thank you.
It has been fun. And thank you so much for opening up to us and for taking the time to be here and talk with us.
My sharing your wisdom.
What a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the WoW podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration. Brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University.